My role as audio director is about setting the vision and the creative direction for the sound and music in the game, and getting all of the sound designers and composers and everybody who's working on it focused in the same direction. One of the things that Dead Space 2 has that Dead Space 1 didn't is that it takes place in the living area. It's a functioning city that's just recently been evacuated, so there's a lot of opportunity for unusual spaces to find things, people's apartments, and there's a preschool that you get into. There's a lot of places where, taken out of context, now with the horror applied to them, are very, very scary. There's a great sound in the game that appears really only briefly in one location, but I think it really says a lot about the game. You're in the inner workings of this big sprawl space station, and you come to the area where they're filtering the air, and it's done with these huge bags that are billowing in and out. And we needed a sound for this, and we really wanted it to sound sick. This infection is taking over the area. So one of the sound designers happened to have a really bad cold, so we locked him in a room and recorded him for a couple of hours just wheezing into a microphone, and then layered all of that up, added some mechanical sounds to it, and that's the sound of the sprawl breathing bag getting sicker and sicker. Dead Space 1 was really good at establishing tension and terror, and we wanted to keep that moving forward. That's the meaty core of what we're doing with the soundtrack. But I really thought we could expand out a little bit too. In Dead Space 2, Isaac speaks. You see his face. He takes his helmet off. He's struggling with this internal psychological drama, and I thought this is a great thing that we could use to expand the range of the music.
There's a vulnerability to the character that players probably didn't pick up in the first one. He was an engineer, and he was estranged from everybody else, and it was horror, but not seeing someone's face, that unknown aspect, really makes a big difference in the second one.
So we've introduced what we're calling these vulnerable elements, and Jason's done a great job composing these really interesting cues that are done with a small string ensemble, and they're very raw sounding and still very Dead Space, still very dissonant, but it's a different kind of character and opens it up. What we find is that it makes this tension even more tense when you've had this chance to relate to Isaac and have this more organic kind of a feel. So that's one of the ways in which we've expanded the palette on Dead Space 2.
It's funny because Dead Space, the game you play it, the score is this really dark experience, especially even if you listen to it in the soundtrack, especially if you play it in the game. But the sessions are actually a lot of fun.
We did a number of recording sessions at Skywalker Sound. Great musicians, different configurations of the orchestra in the studio at different times so we could capture the different layers of the music. The instrumentation tends to be fairly standard, actually, for an orchestral setup. We added extra bass trombones and contrabass trombones and things that really provide unusual textures. We asked the players oftentimes to play out at the absolute extremes of their instruments. Play the lowest note you can possibly play and play it as loud as you can possibly play it.
Banging on things with sticks, playing their horns in ways that just makes every wrong sound that a musician was trained not to do.
And at first they were resistant. At first they said, well, that's not going to sound good. I can't make that sound right. And the instruction was over and over, yes, that's what we want. We don't want it to sound right. We want it to sound different. This is going to be very surprising when the player hears this. And oftentimes we'll record entire cues that are nothing but unusual techniques. There's no piece of music there that the player can see.
And in any other game, it would sound completely wrong. But in Dead Space, completely wrong equals completely right. The goal of the score is the preparation for the boo. Whatever the boo is. I mean, if I do my job right, if you get up to this corner that you're scared to walk down, a giant fluffy bunny rabbit could jump out and it would still scare you to death.